Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is April, and I'm a spiritual mentor and awakening guide, here to guide and support you through the stages of your awakening journey. Let's go ahead and dive into today's topic. The topic that I'm being called to share with you today is the topic of spiritual gifts and how those compare to psychic gifts. I'm going to talk about the spiritual gifts that those going through an awakening might experience, the ways they can show up later as what others would term psychic gifts, and how the terminology can be feared in certain communities or sectors when in reality we're all born with these special gifts. So I would like to just tell you to start out a little bit about myself, who I am and what I teach. When my awakening began, I had a sense of who God was, what the spiritual realm was, and I always had a strong intuition, and I knew that I had spiritual gifts growing up, but I had gotten to the point in my life where I was just kind of running like a hamster on a wheel, going through the motions of life and really disconnected with myself. I was so disconnected with myself and so much into my human existence, being a mom, being a career woman, being a wife, and doing and going and hustling, that I really didn't have a connection to the Creator or to the spiritual realm the way I do today. I did not always have the level of spiritual gifts that I have today. They were brought about by my awakening, which I later learned was just the way that I returned to myself and my true being by healing and clearing away layers of wounding, conditioning, and programming that was blocking me from really tapping into my spiritual gifts. So how did I even discover that I had spiritual gifts? When my awakening started, I was really focused on psychology and healing some of my childhood wounds and traumas and unpacking some of my patterns and conditioning, that I hadn't really yet started to see my spiritual gifts come online. It took me about a year of healing and going through the aftermath of the catalyst to my awakening before I actually started to wake up. And that was in the spring of 2020 during the pandemic, which I know is when a lot of people's awakening journey began. The first signs of my spiritual gifts came as they probably did for many of you. I started seeing repeating number signs. I started seeing animal signs. I started noticing things. I was hyper aware of everything around me, and that something was trying to communicate with me. I didn't know what it was, but when I would think about it, I would see it. When I would write about it, journal about it, it would start to come true. And then it evolved from seeing angel numbers and animal signs and other synchronicities to having these very intense visions and dreams that would sometimes come true. Premonitions, I would call them. But it wasn't just my gifts of sight. I also started receiving internal messages, what I like to call downloads or channeled messages or just intuitive knowing. Some people in the religious community might say, they felt the Holy Spirit talking to them or working through them. They felt God speaking to them. However you want to describe it, for me, I say I receive a download or a intuitive message or a channeled message, which is the divine or my spirit team speaking directly to me. Sometimes my higher self speaking to me. When these spiritual gifts started to open up, that's when I realized this is not just a midlife crisis. I am not going crazy. There is something happening to me that is very purposeful. And the more I started to grow and dive into spirituality and study things on my own, the more I started to realize what was actually going on. I came across the term one day, spiritual awakening, and then I started to find podcasts on spiritual awakening. And then I started to read blog after blog after blog and articles and books about different spiritual ideologies and forms of healing and the awakening experience. And that's when I realized I was in fact going through a spiritual awakening. So what do I mean by spiritual gifts? When I say spiritual gifts, what those are a heightened form of your five senses. You can become hyper in tune with your feelings, your emotions, and your physical body and how it feels. You can also become hyper aware of your surroundings, and you might be super observant and notice signs and synchronicities all around you. You can also become intuitive, more intuitive, which means your higher self is speaking to you clearly, or God is speaking to you clearly, source, spirit, whatever you want to call it. And you know that something is giving you guidance or nudges from the inside. There were a few times where I received an internal message that was so strong. It felt like someone's fist was pushing on the inside of my stomach. It came right from my gut. And you'll start to notice that those type of intuitive messages usually come in your gut area or in your heart space. They never come from the mind. The mind is the ego. So when you get a message from your inner being that is very strong and you don't know why, you can't explain it, but you are told this is what you need to do. You need to write this book. You need to create this business. You need to call this person. You need to go visit this sacred place, whatever it might be. Then you need to listen to that, because that is your spiritual self, your soul coming alive. So what is the difference between spiritual gifts and psychic gifts? To me, they are the same thing. What I think our culture and maybe the religious community has done is to create stereotypes and belief systems around the terms psychic gifts or psychics, to the point where people are fearful of it. People tend to fear what they don't understand. And for people that have not gone through a spiritual awakening and have not opened up their spiritual gifts to the capacity that you and I have, the term psychic it carries a negative connotation. It's something to be feared. Where when you're experiencing, you know it's not something to be feared. You know it is the most natural state of our human existence, that we come from source, or we come from God. God, source, the creator, the divine, lives inside of us. The reason you have gifts is because you are part of that source energy. Therefore, when you become really in tune with yourself and your creator, you can speak to each other more easily. All psychic gifts are just an enhancement of your five senses: sight, sound, touch, knowing, and sometimes tasting. So they're gifts that we all have the ability to develop. It's just that some of us open up to it sooner or in a bigger way than others, and others stay asleep. Those people who are asleep or they haven't yet awakened just aren't aware that they have these gifts, and because they haven't opened up to that experience yet. So let's talk about how these gifts present themselves and some of the different ways that we can notice spiritual gifts. And I'm going to just touch on the four main types of spiritual gifts or psychic gifts. Use the term you feel most comfortable with. If you're not ready to say psychic gifts, that's okay. It took me a long time to get to the point where I felt comfortable using that term. but spiritual gifts is fine as well. So the 4 main spiritual gifts or psychic gifts that you may experience as you awaken are claircognizance, clairsentience, clairvoyance, and clairaudience. And I'll just talk about each one a little bit. But again, remember, these gifts are not for a chosen few, okay? That we all have 5 senses and we all have spiritual gifts living inside of us, or the ability to open up to them. It's just that some people aren't as aware as others. So the gift that I'll start with is claircognizance. And I mentioned this a little bit when I talked about having that inner knowing or receiving an intuitive message or feeling like God is speaking to you. But claircognizance is the inner knowing, or the gift of knowing. And sometimes it comes through inner voice inside of you. Sometimes you just know things and you can't explain why you know them, but you know them with such certainty that you just know that it's true. You may sense things about other people. You may know events before they happen. You may just receive information through your crown chakra. The crown chakra is the chakra that is tied to claircognizance. And so you may feel, I say download because literally it's like information is dropping into your crown from the spiritual realm. Sometimes I can feel it as information comes in. I'll be driving my car and all of a sudden I'll get a download where I can just feel that information dropping in. That is claircognizance. The next type of psychic gift that I personally work with a lot is clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is, as I mentioned, when you see angel numbers, you see animal signs, billboard signs, license plates. You might notice receipts, special hidden words and messages from the spiritual realm that start to show up for you in your daily life. Clairvoyance can also be dreams and visions. So you may receive messages through your dreams and visions, premonitions, really intense dreams that feel real and sometimes come true. Next, we have clairsentience, and clairsentience is the gift of feeling. So people who are empaths or people who are really sensitive to other people's energy are clairsentient. This gift shows up when you walk into a room and you can read the room, or you can feel the vibe. You can feel someone's energy and intention. They may say one thing, but their energy says another, and you pick up on those cues. People who are clairsentient really look at body language, your gestures, your tone of voice, and the energy that you emit to kind of put a message together to read a person. Is what the person is presenting or saying matching the energy that you're feeling? Sometimes clairsentience will also present itself as getting goosebumps in the presence of a spirit guide, angel, or ancestor. If you're receiving a message, or let's say you're talking to somebody and whatever they're telling you has a special meaning to it, you might feel goosebumps. It can even be, I get goosebumps sometimes when I'm listening to high vibrational music. That's just God's presence or your angel's presence coming through to you. Next, we have clairaudience. Now, this is the tricky one. I don't have this gift as strongly as my other spiritual gifts, but clairaudience sometimes will sound like other people's voices, but it's not the kind of voice you hear when you are, mentally unsound, because it's very purposeful. It's a message only meant for you that you would understand or interpret. And it sometimes sounds like different genders or, different voices altogether. It's not your own voice talking. And sometimes you actually could hear spirits or angels talking to you as a person. The other way clairaudience shows up is sometimes you'll hear things through music. Music is a really common way that the spiritual realm communicates with us. So you might receive messages through music, through movies, through other auditory cues. And then lastly, there are other spiritual gifts that deal with taste and smell, but they are not as common as the four I've just mentioned. But if you have noticed these gifts, or if you feel that you're shifting in your perception of the things around you and your experiences, then you could very well be opening up some of these psychic or spiritual gifts. When this happens to you, do not be afraid of it. It is nothing to be feared. It is actually our most natural state of being. They are part of our soul and our soul's blueprint. We're each given different gifts. One gift that you might have, I might not have. A gift I have, you might not have. And together, we're supposed to work in collaboration to make beautiful things and to co-create with the universe. So each of us has our own role to play here on earth and our own divine purpose, and your gifts are part of that. Once you begin to awaken and your chakras start to clear and you've done a lot of that healing work, your spiritual gifts are going to open up and expand more and more. Working with a mentor or a spiritual teacher is probably one of the most helpful things that you can do, because often when we're starting to notice these gifts come online, it can be a little confusing and scary. You might think you're going crazy, or you might think something is wrong with you, that you're hearing voices, etc. But the more you learn to tune into yourself and understand yourself, and the more these experiences start to play out, then the more you're going to understand that it is part of your rise in consciousness, of your awakening experience. The other reason why working with a mentor can be helpful is that there may not be people in your close circle of family and friends who understand what you're going through. It may not feel safe for you to share these things with them. They may not receive it well. And somebody who has been through these experiences will be able to guide and support you in a more comforting way. So please check out different programs that work specifically with the psychic gifts. There is a way to develop that. My Soul Awaken course does have a whole chapter dedicated to developing your gifts, how to work with your spirit guides, how to interpret the messages that you're receiving, how to ask for help and assistance from the spirit realm, and then how to receive that help. That concludes today's lesson. I hope you found this information helpful, especially if you've noticed that your spiritual gifts are growing and accelerating. If you'd like to learn more about my Soul Awaken course, or just connect with me online, you can find all of my links in my bio. I'm wishing you so much love, and know that there are other people like you and me out there with these gifts as well. You are not alone, and you are not crazy. Sending you so much love. Take care.